should come in from the rain.
Go on, use the service door.
I understand.
Let me help you.
The rain hadn't stopped, and neither had the laughter. They kept the black nanny waiting at the gate, then sent her to the service door like a delivery gone wrong. For 6 weeks they mocked her face, her hands, her accent. None of them knew the woman scrubbing their floors was the only soul alive the most dangerous man in Seoul trusted with his secrets. And she had come for a reason. Watch what happens when they learn who she really is. Before we go any further, if you believe the people the world underestimates are usually the ones worth watching, do me one small favor. Tap that subscribe button and ring the bell so the next story finds its way to you. Now settle in, because you are going to want to know exactly how Bracia Toussaint ended up standing at that gate in the rain. The rain came down over Pyeongchang-dong, the way money comes down in that neighborhood, quietly, and on somebody else's schedule. Bracia Toussaint stood outside the iron gate of the Seoul family estate, with a single canvas bag at her feet and water running off the end of her braid. She had been standing there for 19 minutes. The intercom had buzzed once, and a woman's voice had said, in Korean, "Wait there. Don't touch the buzzer again," and then nothing. Behind the gate, through the bars, Bracia could see the house. 3 stories of pale stone and glass, lit up gold from the inside. The kind of house that photographs well in magazines and swallows people whole. There were cars in the courtyard, a party then. Laughter drifting out through a cracked window, bright and easy. The sound of people who have never once had to stand in the rain. A young houseman finally came down the walk with an umbrella he did not offer her. He looked at her the way you look at a delivery that arrived at the wrong address. "You're the nanny," he said. "I am." "Huh." He unlocked the pedestrian gate and looked her up and down, her face, her hands, her hair, and let out a small laugh he did not bother to hide. They said American. Nobody said this. Bracia picked up her bag. "Service entrance is around the side," he said. "Not this way. Never this way." "Understood," Bracia said, in Korean so clean it stopped him for half a second. Then she walked around to the side of the house, in the rain, and let him think whatever he wanted to think. That was the first night. Remember it. Because 6 weeks later, every soul in that house would be standing in that same courtyard, with their hands folded and their heads down, and not one of them would be able to look her in the eye. To understand how Bracia Toussaint ended up at that gate, you have to go back 9 days, to a room on the top floor of a quiet building in Junggu that had no sign on the door. The room smelled of pine and old paper. There was a low table, a pot of barley tea, and an old man sitting with a blanket across his knees in the middle of summer. His name was Jang Man-suk. He was 71 years old. For 38 of those years, he had been the head of the Cheonma organization, the Heavenly Horse, and in the parts of this city where the streetlights don't get fixed, his name was still spoken carefully, the way you speak of weather that has killed people. He was also dying. 4 months, the doctors said. Maybe 6 if he was stubborn, and he was. Across the table from him sat a black woman in a grey suit with her hands folded, and every man in that building, men who had done things they would answer for one day, went quiet when she walked past. Because Bracia Toussaint was not one of them, and that was exactly the point. Her father, Émile Toussaint, had run a small shipping brokerage out of Busan back in the 90s, an honest man in a dishonest port. One winter night in 1994, Émile found a stranger bleeding behind his warehouse and, instead of calling anybody, dragged him inside, stitched him up with fishing line and a steady hand, and never asked a single question. That stranger was Jang Man-suk. Émile died of a heart attack when Bracia was 19 and a sophomore in Chicago, with tuition she couldn't cover. 2 weeks after the funeral, a letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a bank draft, and one line written in careful English. "A debt is a debt. Finish your schooling." The letters came every semester for 6 years. Law school, then forensic accounting, then a master's she took at night, while she worked days. And when Bracia finally flew to Seoul at 28, to look the man in the face and tell him she was going to pay every one of it back, Jang Man-suk laughed until he coughed and said, "Sit down, daughter of Émile. Let me show you what your father actually bought." She never left. She never carried a weapon. She never gave an order. She read paper. That was all she did. Ledgers, contracts, land filings, shell companies. the tax returns of men who thought no one was reading. In 8 years, she had saved that organization more money than every enforcer in it combined, and she had quietly walked it out of 3 businesses that would have put every one of them in a cell. They called her Seonsengnim, teacher, and they meant it. The reason Jang Man-sok trusted her above his own blood was simple, and he said it out loud at least once a year. Bracia wanted nothing. She had no faction, no cousins waiting for a promotion, no claim on his chair when he was gone. She was the only person in his entire world who could tell him he was wrong and have nothing to gain by it. That night in Junggu, he pushed a photograph across the low table. A little girl, 7 years old, round face, serious eyes, standing in a school uniform with her arms straight down at her sides like a soldier. Her name is Yun So, he said. Bracia looked at the photo a long moment. She has Woo Jin's eyes, she said quietly. Jang Man-sok's son, Woo Jin, had wanted nothing to do with the life. He'd walked away at 22, gone into architecture, married a girl named Han Se-ri, and told his father to stay out of his house. Jang Man-sok, and this is the part people never believed about him, did. For 11 years he stayed away. He watched his son's life from a distance like a man watching a train he wasn't allowed to board. Then Woo Jin's car went off a wet road outside Yangpyeong 4 years ago, and there was no more distance left to keep. The mother remarried, Jang Man-sok said. 19 months later, a man named Seo Chang-min, construction, loud, owes everybody. And the girl, the old man's hands trembled around his cup, and it was not the illness. I have written 11 letters, all returned. I sent a man with a gift for her birthday. Se-ri called the police and told them a criminal was stalking her family. He set the cup down. I am told the child has not spoken since the funeral. 4 years, Brescia. 4 years and not one word. Brescia didn't say anything for a while. Outside, a bus hissed past in the dark. Send me, she said. He looked up. They're advertising for a live-in nanny, she said. English speaking, Western, for the wife's image. I saw the listing 3 days ago. It's been open 11 weeks because nobody lasts. Brescia, his voice was rough. You are my counsel, not a servant in some fool's house. I'm the only person you have who nobody knows, she said. Send a man and you'll frighten her. Send a lawyer, and Se-ri will bury you in court until you're gone. Send me, and I sit at that child's table every single day, and I find out who she is. She reached across, and, for the first time in 8 years, put her hand over his. You want to meet your granddaughter before you die, so let me go and earn the door. Jang Man-sok was quiet a long, long time. They will not be kind to you, he said finally. That house, those people, you understand what they will see when they look at you. Brescia took her hand back and smiled, and there was something old and tired and entirely unbreakable in it. Sir, she said, I've been black in rooms a lot worse than that one. The interview lasted 11 minutes. Han Se-ri did not stand when Brescia entered. She was 39 and beautiful in the specific, expensive way of a woman who has purchased every single feature of her own face and dares you to notice. She sat on a white sofa in a white room and looked at Brescia's resume, the way you'd look at a menu in a restaurant you'd already decided was beneath you. Chicago, she said. Yes, ma'am. Your Korean is... She waved a hand, searching for the insult, and settled on the sweetest one available. Surprising. I've had good teachers. Se-ri set the paper down. Let me be clear about what this is. My daughter needs English. Real English, not the academy nonsense. My friends' children all have tutors from London, Sydney. A pause, and a small, delighted smile as she found the thing she'd been reaching for. You're not exactly the picture I had in mind. But honestly, it might be interesting. People will talk, and people talking about me is never the worst thing. She said it as though she'd made a joke, and looked at Brescia to see if she'd flinch. Brescia did not flinch. Brescia had eaten worse than that for breakfast in 3 countries. When would you like me to start? She said. The house had rules. Brescia ate in the kitchen, standing, after everyone else had finished. She was not to use the main stairs. She was not to be visible when guests came, unless Se-ri specifically wanted her visible, which happened only when there was an audience worth the trouble. Her room was off the laundry, a converted storage space, with a window the size of a shoebox, and a radiator that clanked all night, like something trying to get out. The staff took their cue from the top, the way staff always do. Mrs. Pio, the housekeeper, 30 years in service and no love left in her, called her Ya, hey, you, the word you use for a dog or a child. The houseman, Mingi, made a performance of holding his breath when she walked past, and there was a running joke about her hair that ran for 2 straight weeks and never once got funnier. Once at breakfast, Sairi's sister Han Bo-ra came by and stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Bracia wipe down a counter. "Do they all have arms like that?" Bo-ra said, out loud, to Sairi, in Korean, 3 feet from Bracia's face. "Like a man's." And Sairi laughed. That was the part Bracia remembered later, not the sister. The laugh. Bracia wiped the counter, finished the corner, rinsed the cloth, wrung it, hung it on the rail exactly square. Every night, in her room off the laundry, she wrote in a small notebook, "Not feelings." Bracia was not a woman who kept a diary of feelings. She wrote facts. What came into the house? What went out? Which contractor called at 11 at night and made Seo Chang-min leave the room to answer? What the girl ate? What the girl didn't? And every single night, on the last line of the page, she wrote the same 4 words. She still hasn't spoken. Yunso was 7 and lived like a ghost in her own house. She had a room upstairs with 100 toys, none of them touched. She had a schedule, piano, math, English, taekwondo, that filled every hour from the moment she came home. She had a mother who took photographs of her constantly and looked at her almost never, and she did not speak. Not to teachers, not to doctors, not to the 3 specialists Siri had paid enormous sums to, and then stopped paying, when they suggested the problem might be in the house, rather than in the child. For 9 days, Bracia didn't push. She just showed up. She sat in the corner of the room during piano and read her book. She walked Yunso to the gate and back. She said good morning in English and good night in Korean, and asked nothing, ever, that required an answer. On the 10th day, it rained again, and taekwondo was cancelled, and there was 1 unscheduled hour in that child's life, for the first time in 4 years. Bracia sat down on the floor across from her, took a square of paper out of her pocket, and started folding. Yunso watched. She pretended not to, but she watched. Bracia folded a crane, then a frog, then something with too many legs that was supposed to be a horse, and was not a horse. And she looked at it, and she sighed, and she said, out loud, in English, "Well, that's the ugliest horse in Korea." And a small sound came out of Yunso. Not a word, a breath, really. The ghost of a laugh, escaping before she could catch it, and her hand flew up over her mouth like she'd broken something. Bracia didn't look up, didn't make a single thing of it, just kept folding. "Yeah," she said, "it's bad. You could probably do better." And after a very long minute, a small hand reached across the floor and took a square of paper. It took 19 more days to get a word. They were in the garden, out past the hedge where the cameras didn't reach, and Bracia was telling a story about her father, how Émile Toussaint could not sing at all, and sang anyway, every morning, loud, and how their neighbor used to bang on the wall with a shoe. And Yunso said, in Korean, so soft it was almost weather, "My dad sang." Bracia's whole body went still. She kept her eyes on the hedge. She did not turn. She did not gasp. She understood exactly how fragile the thing was that had just landed in the grass between them. "Yeah?" she said. "Was he any good?" Yunso shook her head. Then, after a moment, she added, "Uma says I'm not supposed to talk about him." "Why not?" "Because he was a bad family." The child said it like a lesson she'd memorized. "Because Halabeoji is a bad man, and if people know, we can't be anything." Bracia sat in that garden with her hands in her lap and felt something turn over in her chest, slow and hot. 4 years. A child stops speaking for 4 years, and 3 specialists can't find it, because the answer isn't a disorder. The answer is that a 7-year-old was told that half of everything she is shameful, and so she decided the safest thing to do with a mouth was keep it shut. "Yun Su-ya," Bracia said. "Look at me." The girl looked. "Your father sang badly. That's a fact. I know a lot of facts, and that one's a good one." She leaned in. Nobody gets to take your facts away from you. Not ever. Not even people who love you. Yunso looked at her a long time. Then she went back to her folding. But that night, Bracia wrote a different last line in the notebook. She spoke. 6 words. Do not tell him yet. She sat with the pen in her hand for a long while, thinking about an old man with a blanket on his knees in the middle of summer, and how badly he wanted news, and how much worse it would be to give him hope and then take it back. Not yet, she wrote. If that moment reached you, a little girl finding her voice again after 4 years of silence, let me know with a like. It is a small thing, but it tells me these are the stories you want me to keep telling. And stay close, because what this quiet woman does next is the whole reason we are here. Here is the thing about Seo Changmin that Bracia worked out in her 3rd week, without ever once asking a question. He was drowning. She read paper. It was all she did. And in that house, paper was everywhere. Envelopes on the hall table, a laptop left open, a contractor's invoice used as a coaster. Seowon Construction had bid a resort development in Gangwon-do at a number that made no sense, won it, and discovered on month 4 that the ground was wrong. He was 11 months behind. He had refinanced twice. The second bank had said no, so he'd gone to the 3rd kind of lender, the kind that says yes to everybody. Bracia knew the name on the paper before she saw it, because there was only one crew stupid enough and hungry enough to write that kind of note in this city that year. Gute Rim. Mapo. A young man with an old man's appetite and none of the patience, who had spent 3 years trying to pick a fight with the Cheonma organization and could not get anyone to look at him. She wrote it all in the notebook. Dates, amounts, the escalation clause on page 4 that Seo Changmin had clearly never read, the one that let Gute Rim convert the debt to equity in 90 days, and then convert equity into whatever he wanted. And she thought, he has no idea what he's brought into a house with a child in it. The party was on a Saturday in early August. 40 people. Seiri's people, the wives, the sister, a plastic surgeon, 2 women from a magazine, champagne in the courtyard, lanterns strung through the trees, everybody photographing everything. Yunso was brought down at 8, in a white dress, to be looked at. She stood by the wall with her hands straight down at her sides like a soldier, and said nothing. And Seiri's friends made the noises people make. And then one of them said, "Where's the famous Nanny? Bora says you have to see her." And Seiri's eyes lit up. "Bracia," she called across the courtyard, in that bright, warm, terrible voice. "Bracia, come here. Come, come. Everyone wants to meet you." Bracia came. She stood in the middle of 40 people, in a black dress she'd bought in Chicago, 9 years earlier, and she folded her hands, and she waited. "Isn't she something?" Seiri said. She reached up, and, casually, the way you'd adjust a lamp, put her hand on Bracia's braid. "Feel this. Bora, feel it. It's like rope." Somebody laughed. Then somebody else, because that's how laughing works. "Say something in English," Bora said. "Go on, say something. Do a little bit of that thing," someone else said. "The music. You know, she's very good with Yunso though," Seiri said, over the noise. Generous now, warming to her own kindness. "Honestly, she's like a member of the family, aren't you? You're practically family." And then she turned to her friends and added, in Korean, with her hand cupped around her mouth like a stage whisper, meant to be heard by everyone. "For what I pay her, she'd better be." The courtyard laughed, all of it, 40 people in the lantern light, and Bracia stood there and let it happen, because there is a kind of strength that looks exactly like weakness from the outside, and only one of those 2 things can survive a room like that. She did not see the small figure in the white dress by the wall. She did not see Yunso's hands come up into fists. But the whole courtyard heard it when the child screamed, "Stop it!" Everything stopped. 40 faces turned. Yunso stood in the middle of that courtyard, shaking from her feet to her jaw, 4 years of silence coming out of her all at once, and she screamed at her mother, "Stop laughing at her. She's nice to me. You're not." The glass in Han Seri's hand did not fall. Bracia always remembered that. Everyone in that courtyard was frozen solid. 40 people staring at a child they had all been told could not speak. And Seri's first move, Her very first instinct was not to run to her daughter. It was to look around and count how many people had seen. Her face went through 3 things in 2 seconds. Shock. Then, for one flicker, and Bracia caught it. Something almost like fear, and then it arrived at the only place it knew how to go. Rage. "What did you do to her?" she said. "Sayri," the sister started. "What did you do to my daughter?" "She spoke," Bracia said quietly. "That's all. She spoke." 4 years, Sayri's voice cracked across the courtyard. 4 years, doctors, specialists, and you come into my house for 2 months, and now she's screaming at me in front of... She stopped, breathed, and when she spoke again, her voice was perfectly level, which was so much worse. "You turned my child against me." "No, ma'am," Bracia said. "I just didn't laugh at her. It was the truest thing said in that courtyard all night, and it was the worst possible thing she could have said, because 40 people heard it." "Get out," Sayri said. "Ma'am, get out of my house." They gave her 11 minutes. Mrs. Pio stood in the doorway of the little room off the laundry and watched her pack the canvas bag to make sure nothing extra went into it. Mingi walked her to the gate, the side gate, never the main one, and this time he did not laugh, because something in the courtyard had frightened him, and he didn't know what. And behind her, from a 3rd-floor window, a child was beating both fists against the glass and screaming her name, and 2 people were holding her back. Bracia did not turn around. She could not have kept walking if she had. The gate closed. It was raining again. She stood on that street for a full minute, with the water coming down. Then she took out her phone, and she did not call Jang Man-sok, because that was not the call that mattered yet. She called the office in Junggu. "It's Sewon Seng-nim," she said. "Pull everything on the Gangwon-do Resort Development, Sewon Construction, and find out who's holding the second note." A pause. "I already know who's holding it. Find out how much time is left on the clause." Then she went and got a room in a motel with a plastic mattress cover, and she sat on the edge of the bed all night with her notebook open on her knees, and she did not sleep at all. "Now stop for just 1 second, and tell me something. If you were Bracia Toussaint, thrown out into the rain, a frightened child left behind those tall stone walls, what would you do next? Say it in the comments, then make sure you have subscribed, because what she did with the next 31 hours is something you will not soon forget. She had 31 hours. That's how long it took. At 2 in the morning on Monday, Gu Tae-rim's people came over the wall of the Seo estate. Not many. 6. They didn't need many, because Seo Chang-min had 2 housemen, and a camera system, and an escalation clause he'd never read, and the 90 days had run out on Friday. It was not a robbery. Tae-rim didn't want the silverware. He wanted a signature, and he had finally figured out the fastest way to get one from a man like Seo Chang-min, which was to walk upstairs and stand in a child's bedroom doorway and let the man watch him do it. At 2:19 a.m., Han Si-ri called the police. At 2:31 a.m., she called her sister. At 2:44 a.m., sitting on the floor of her own hallway with her back against the wall, and her hands shaking so badly she dropped the phone twice, she scrolled through her contacts past every wealthy, connected, beautiful friend who had laughed in her courtyard on Saturday night, and she found the last number she had ever wanted to dial. It rang 4 times. "Bracia," she said. "Bracia, please. How many are in the house?" Sayri made a sound. "What? How many men?" Sayri. "How many are inside? Where are they? And where is Yun-so right now?" Bracia's voice was not loud. It was not even unkind. It was simply the flattest, steadiest thing Han Se-ri had ever heard in her life, and she answered it the way you answer a doctor. 6. 4 downstairs, 2 upstairs with Chang-min. She's in her room. She's locked in. I locked it. Is she alone? Yes. Then here's what you're going to do, Bracia said. You're going to hang up. You're going to go and sit outside that door on the floor where she can hear you, and you are going to talk to her. About anything. About nothing. You don't stop talking until I tell you to. The police said 40 minutes. The road is Seri. A pause. You don't need 40 minutes. You need 11. The line went dead. Here is what Han Se-ri never understood, and what she would spend the rest of her life understanding. She thought she'd hired a nanny. At 2:51 a.m., 3 cars came up the hill in Pyeongchang-dong, without their headlights on, and stopped outside the iron gate. Nobody rushed. That was the thing Siri remembered. Nobody ran. Men got out of those cars the way men get out of cars at a funeral, unhurried, buttoning a jacket, checking a watch, and they stood in a loose line in the rain and waited, and not one of them looked at the house. They were waiting for the last door to open. We are almost there now, the part you have been waiting for. If this story has held you all the way to this gate, do one last thing for me. Tap that like button, and check that you are subscribed, so you are right here when the next story begins. Now, watch what happens when they finally open the door. Bracia Toussaint got out of the back of the second car, in a grey suit with her braid pinned up, and she walked to the front of that line, and every man there turned toward her. She did not raise her voice. She never did. The child is on the 3rd floor, east side. Locked room. Her mother is outside the door. Nobody goes past that landing but me. She looked down the line. 4 in the front room, 2 upstairs. Goutte Rim's people. So they're young and they're loud, and half of them have never done this before. I want them frightened. I don't want them hurt. Do you understand what I said? Yes, Seoul. Say it back to me. Frightened, not hurt. There's a 7-year-old in that house, Bracia said. She's had enough of men in the dark. Nobody adds to it. She turned toward the gate. And gentlemen, the old man is on the phone. He will hear every word, so conduct yourselves accordingly. Then Bracia Toussaint walked up to the front gate of the house that had thrown her out in the rain, and she pressed the buzzer with one finger, and she waited to be let in the main way. It took 9 minutes, not 11. Bracia never went into the front room. She heard it, voices going up, then a chair, then a silence that arrived very suddenly, the way silence does when 6 young men understand all at once, together, exactly whose house they've walked into, and who they've actually been borrowing from all along. She went up the back stairs. Han-Se-ri was on the floor in the 3rd floor hallway, with her back against her daughter's door, her mascara gone, her expensive face wrecked, and ordinary, and human for maybe the first time in a decade, still talking, hoarse, babbling, out of things to say, and saying them anyway, and she looked up, and there was Bracia. Bracia crouched down in front of her. You did good, she said. Give me the key. Seiri's hand was shaking so hard it took her 3 tries. Bracia, her voice was barely there. Who are you? Bracia took the key. Ask me tomorrow, she said. Tonight I'm the nanny. She unlocked the door and went in, and Yun-So came off that bed like something fired out of a gun, and Bracia caught her, and knelt on the floor of that room, and held on, and did not say a word, because there wasn't one, and because the child had already said everything 2 nights ago, in a courtyard full of laughing strangers. Down in the front room, Goutte Rim was learning that the paper he'd been so proud of had been bought out from under him at 4:40 that afternoon by a shell company he'd never heard of, registered to a shipping brokerage in Busan that hadn't traded in 29 years. The brokerage was called Toussaint and Daughter. It had been sitting dormant for exactly that purpose since 2004. They came at 9 the next morning. 1 car, no line of men, no theatre. The old man walked up the path himself, slowly, with a cane he hated, in a plain grey coat, and Han-Se-ri opened her own front door because there was nobody left in that house with the nerve to do it for her. She stood in the doorway of her own home, in front of her father-in-law, for the first time in 4 years. You laughed at her, Jang Man-sok said. It was not a question, and it was not a threat. He said it the way you'd say it's cold out. Seiri's mouth opened, closed. I know what you were afraid of, he went on. You were afraid that what I am would stick to that child. So you cut my name out of her like a tumor, and you told her that her father was something to be ashamed of. He looked past her, into the beautiful hall. You didn't cut out me, Seiri. I'm still here. All you cut out was her voice. Seiri started to cry then, and it was not a pretty thing, and nobody in that hallway helped her with it. I am not going to take her from you, the old man said. Her head came up. You thought I would. Not all these years. That's why the letters came back. He shifted his weight on the cane. I've had 4 years, and more money than God, and I could have taken that child out of this house in an afternoon. Ask yourself why I didn't. He tapped the cane once against the floor. Because Wu Jin asked me to stay out of his house, and a man who won't keep a promise to a dead son isn't a man at all. He looked at her, and for one moment Han Se-ri saw all 71 years of him. "I'm not here for custody," Jang Man-sok said. "I have 4 months. I'm here for Sundays." There is a photograph from that autumn that only 3 people have ever seen. It's badly taken, slightly out of focus, shot on a phone in the garden of a house in Pyeongchang-dong. There's an old man sitting on a low wall with a blanket on his knees in October, which suits it better than August. There's a 7-year-old sitting beside him, close, talking with her hands, and there are 11 paper cranes lined up on the wall between them, and one thing with too many legs that is supposed to be a horse and is not a horse. She talked all winter, that was the thing. 4 years of nothing, and then a child who could not be stopped. Questions, opinions, complaints, the whole enormous backlog of a person coming out at once. Jang Man-sok got 6 months, not 4. He was stubborn. He'd told them. He heard her sing, badly, loudly, exactly like her father. He died in March, in a room with a window, and there were 2 people holding his hands, and one of them was 7 years old, and one of them was the daughter of a shipping broker from Busan, who once stitched up a stranger with fishing line and never asked a single question. Seo Chang-min lost the Gangwon-do development. He kept his company, barely, restructured under terms drafted by a forensic accountant who gave him exactly enough to survive and not one more, and who told him to his face, across his own dining table, that the terms were not a kindness to him. "It's a kindness to the child who lives in your house," she said. "You just happen to be standing in the way of it." Mrs. Pyo retired. Min-gi did not. He worked another 8 months in that house, and every morning for 8 months he had to say good morning to the woman he'd once made a show of holding his breath around, because Bracia Toussaint stayed. Not as a nanny, Se-ri offered. Tripled the salary, offered the guest suite, offered anything, in the frantic way of a woman trying to buy her way out of a memory. Bracia said no to all of it. She took Sundays instead, every Sunday, for years. Piano, then a walk, then folding paper at the kitchen table. And no, she never did learn to make that horse. Han Se-ri learned to sit at that table too. It took her a long time. She was never a warm woman. Some people aren't built for it, and pretending otherwise is a story for children. But she stopped photographing her daughter and started listening to her, and in this life that is not nothing. That's most of it, actually. She apologized once, just once, properly, in that kitchen, about the courtyard, and the braid, and the laughing, and Bracia listened to all of it, and then said the only thing she had left to say about it. "I forgave you in September, Se-ri. You've been carrying that for 2 years by yourself." Yoon-so is 19 now. She's at university in Seoul. She's loud, which her mother finds exhausting, and her aunt finds mortifying, and which nobody, ever, tries to correct. There's a framed photograph on her desk of an old man on a low garden wall with a blanket on his knees. And when people ask about the woman in the second photograph, the black woman in the grey suit with her braid pinned up, standing at a gate, Yoon-so tells them, every single time, exactly the same thing. "That's my seonsengnim," she says. They thought she was the help, and then she smiles, because it's her favourite part, and it always will be. They were wrong about who was helping who. And that is where we will leave them, on a garden wall, in a photograph, in a young woman's proud voice. If this story moved you, would you do 3 small things before you go? Leave a like so more people find it. Tell me in the comments who you were rooting for. And if you are not subscribed yet, join us. There is another story waiting for you already. Thank you for spending this time with me. I will see you in the next one.